and always know you could feel beauty rising.
Hi, I'm Sue Skaskew from Vermont Volunteer Services for Animals Humane Society, and welcome to our show, For the Animals. Today we have a reoccurring guest, backed by popular demand, Dr. Chris Mangini. He's the owner of Woodstock Animal Care on Route 4 in Woodstock, and you've been there for how many years now?
25 years now.
Half a century, quarter of a century.
Still going, yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Mangini is always there whenever we need him. You can call him any time of the day, and he's right there to help us with animal issues. What we thought we'd do today is ask questions about our four-legged, two-legged, winged friends, and these are questions that people have posed to us or that Dr. Mangini has seen at his office. So welcome back.
Thank you, Sue. Nice to be here.
Okay. First one, this is a big one. In fact, I've just recently had a call from a social worker asking about this, so I did some research. So a lot of what you're going to hear right now and what we're going to refer to is taken right off the internet, so you can find this information by going to the government sites. More than just a pet, service animals. So what is a service animal?
Well, Sue, a service animal is not just a pet or a companion. According to a medical profession in the Americans with Disabilities Act, which can either be a physical or mental impairment, service animals perform some of the functions and tasks that individuals with a disability cannot perform for him or herself. As a result, the person must have a disability which can be either physical or mental impairment.
Okay. And in addition, the animal has to be trained to mitigate a person's disability by performing certain tasks. Leading, pulling, providing balance, and or alerting. They should also be able to follow basic obedience commands such as sit, stay, hear, come, follow, as well as exhibit good behavior. So under this new act, what rights do animals have?
Well, under the ADA, state and local governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations that serve the public generally must allow service animals to accompany people with disabilities in all areas of the facility where the public is normally allowed to go.
And that's a direct quote, so thank you for taking the time to read all those. And I was excited because now there are different types of animals too.
Yeah, I thought it was just restricted to dogs, though.
Well, the dogs, I know up until 2011, it was a variety of animals, but then they narrowed it down to dogs and some horses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But for many years, the Americans with Disability Act, before 1990, did not limit service only to dogs. That's one fact that I found.
See. Yeah.
Therefore, although a service animal has been most often a dog, it also could have been other species, a pig, a horse, a cat. But those are for service animals. So.
In September 2010, a final rule was published in the Federal Register to amend the service animal's definition to be limited to dogs, with some exceptions for miniature horses. There you go. This new regulation went into effect in March of 2011. A person may still keep a service animal, such as a pig, cat, or monkey, for their personal use, but they are not granted public access. That's the difference.
Right, so into the restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't have to allow them in.
Okay. There can be some confusion regarding service animals that assist those living with invisible disabilities caused by chronic illness, injury, pain, and mental disorder. Nonetheless, for those debilitated by such symptoms as extreme fatigue, pain, dizziness, blurred vision, cognitive impairments, a service animal can make all the difference between the quality of their life.
Oh, it's an extra set of senses.
Yeah.
These service animals can perform helpful physical tasks, such as picking up things off the floor, reminding a person to take their medicines, and helping with balance and more. Service animals are also changing their lives by alerting their owners of physiological responses such as a seizure or potentially dangerous changes in blood sugar levels. I'm sure animals can identify a seizure even before the person knows it's going to happen. They can pick up those clues. So that's one of the things they can do.
Have you worked with animals in service, therapy service?
I do their annual exams. I haven't worked with them in service, but they have to have regular physical exams and health checks to make sure they're not bringing disease into the facility wherever they're going. So they have to be really clean animals that are wormed and no parasites and healthy.
In reading some of the facts, I found that it costs about $10,000 to certify an animal as a service animal.
Yeah.
So it's a big investment. But for those living with various types of mental disorders, the final rule now clarifies that individuals with mental disabilities, and I quote, who use service animals that are trained to perform a specific task are protected by the Americans with Disability Act. So for those looking for that, you can of course find it online. But let's talk about situations that service animals help alert a person to.
Well, there's a variety of situations, like an incipient manic episode, anxiety or a panic attack. Alert the owner to aggressive driving is one thing they can do. With confidence in leaving the home or exiting a situation that is causing a rise in anxiety, panic, distress, and or fear. Physical tasks such as reminding the person to take their medication, assisting them with finding their keys or their telephone, turning on the lights to safety check a room, and nudging them to wake up. For those battling post-traumatic stress disorder, service animals can also interrupt flashbacks and nightmares, reduce anxiety and stress, and help regain self-assurance.
I would imagine it's so much more comfortable to leave the home with your dog, especially if you have any fears about going out and being in public, and you've got this dog with you.
Sure. If a person is prone to panic attacks, it's just been proven that animals help sort of stabilize people's moods too. So.
Yeah. The blood pressure and just the anxiety.
Yeah, I mean that's a known effect that we get from animals' presence, is a calming effect. So
Right.
people with panic attacks would benefit from having a pet around, especially a dog, I think.
Sure. And how many seniors too, depend on their animals for their comfort. A lot of them unfortunately have had their family members move on, and they have an animal there that they could depend on every day to wake up to and take care of, and just on that comfort.
Yeah. I mean, millions of people benefit from pets in that way that are not, quote, service animals.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to read this. The Psychiatric Service Dog Society advises anyone obtaining a service dog for their psychiatric disorder should get a letter from their doctor. Their advice probably holds true for all service animals, especially those living with other types of invisible disabilities. I think oftentimes it's hard for the public to conceptualize disabilities unless it's something that you actually see. But we've had people that we've helped through our Humane Society with rental situations, and once they obtain that letter from their doctor saying that this animal is needed in this person's lives, you have so much more power to, you've got the law behind you now,
Right.
but you've got the ability to keep that animal. So,
Well, let me quote the Act. This is a direct quote. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, privately owned businesses that serve the public, such as restaurants, hotels, retail stores, taxi cabs, theaters, concert halls, and sports facilities, are prohibited from discriminating against individuals with disabilities. The ADA requires these businesses to allow people with disabilities to bring their service animals onto businesses' premises in whatever areas customers are generally allowed. In addition, an individual with a service animal may not be segregated from other customers.
okay, we know that some service animals wear harnesses or special identification, but how would a proprietor of a place or somebody who owns an apartment know that it's a service animal? Does the law address that?
Yeah, well, the law states when it is not obvious what service an animal provides, only limited inquiries are allowed. Staff may ask two questions. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? That's all they can ask.
So you can't be asked what your disability is.
Not at all. Staff cannot ask about the person's disability, require medical documentation, require a special identification card or training documentation for the dog, or ask that the dog demonstrate its ability to perform the work task.
It's interesting. That's protecting their rights for sure.
Yeah, it's privacy. It's about privacy.
Well, okay, so a lot of businesses have a no pets policy on their premise. Does it address that as well?
A service animal is not a pet. The ADA requires modification of the landlord's no pets policy to allow the use of a service animal by a person with a disability. So it's, you know, they say no pets, but I guess it's not no service animals, because service animals are not considered a pet.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, but often a business will state that their local county health department has told them that only a seeing eye dog or a guide dog can be admitted. Does the law?
That's a violation of the law. If you refuse to admit any other type of service animal on the basis of local health department regulations or other state and local laws, the ADA provides greater protection for individuals with disabilities, and so it takes priority over the local state laws or regulations.
Okay, I know in reading I found the question also came up that many transportation services, taxis, buses, whatever, prohibit animals in because they say it would be detrimental to their other customers. But in spite of this, and I'm going to quote this, under the American of Disability Act regulation issued by the Department of Transportation for the provision of transportation services to individuals with disabilities by public and private entities, Section 37167D, quote, requires those entities to permit service animals to accompany individuals with disabilities in vehicles and facilities. The regulation defines the term service animal in the same manner as the Department of ADA regulations.
Of course, not all animals helping people are deemed service animals. For example, therapy, social, and facility animals are often utilized for visitations or are placed in homes or facilities to provide therapeutic benefits. Yet, federal laws have no provision for people to be accompanied by therapy animals in places for public accommodation that have no pets policies. Therapy animals are usually not service animals.
Okay, so therapy animals, if I'm reading this all right, can be for emotional support, legitimate, get a doctor's note,
Yes.
and that allows you into housing. However, going into the buses and taxis may not, but you know, it's kind of hard. We're not lawyers, this is an interesting subject. But we did find a really good website too. It was BAZOLON, Center for Mental Health Law, and it's compiled a Fair Housing Information Sheet number 6, Right to Emotional Support Animals in a No Pet Housing. And you can certainly call us and we can give you this information or pass it on. But in order to qualify for reasonable accommodation under the FHA, Federal Housing Association, a tenant must meet the statutory definition of having a disability. And the statute recognizes 3 broad categories of disability: a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities such as walking, seeing, working, learning, washing, dressing, etc. Or 2, a record of having an impairment, and 3, being regarded as having an impairment.
Well, being able to substantiate one's disability is critical in requesting a reasonable accommodation. In the event that a landlord does not allow the emotional support animal at the tenant and the tenant pursues legal action, the court will require evidence of the tenant's disability. Request an exemption to the landlord's no pet rule. It's the best you can do.
Okay, so you know, if somebody needs an emotional support animal to ease the symptoms of a disability as defined by above, he or she should request a reasonable accommodation, this is a quote, in writing from the landlord, manager, or other appropriate authority. The request should state that the tenant has a disability and explain how the requested accommodation will be helpful. In addition, the tenant should include a note from his or her own service provider, such as the doctor or therapist, verifying the need for the support animal. And they provide also a letter online that your physician can use as a template. And you would go again to bazelon.org.
Yeah. Well, the tenant need not disclose the details of the disability, nor provide a detailed medical history. Again, we're getting back to privacy issues.
Right.
Establishing that the support animal is necessary in order to use and enjoy the residence is critical. Courts have consistently held a tenant requesting an emotional support animal as reasonable accommodation must demonstrate a relationship between his or her ability to function and the companionship of the animal.
Would you read that next quote too?
On the other hand, okay, the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination against a renter or buyer on the basis of disability. In light of housing issues with people with verifiable disabilities, the Fair Housing Act Amendment, the ADA, protects the right of people with disabilities to keep emotional support animals even when a landlord's policy explicitly prohibits pets. In most housing complexes, so long as the tenant has a letter or prescription from an appropriate professional, such as a therapist or physician, and meets the definition of a person with a disability, he or she is entitled to a reasonable accommodation that would allow an emotional support animal in the apartment.
This is a big thing. In 2013,
Yeah.
it's made big strides.
Yeah.
But to learn more about this, please go to Section 2 of the Americans with Disability Act, definition of service animal.
I'll bet you that most landlords and other people in the public don't know what we're talking about now, so
Yeah.
might want to have a copy of something like this right on hand.
And I can send that to anybody too. If you shoot me an email, I would be glad to send you what we've researched. So.
Again, ADA regulations define service animal narrowly as any dog that is individually trained to work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including a physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability. The revised regulations specify that the provision of emotional support, well-being, comfort, or companionship do not constitute work or tasks for the purposes of this definition. Thus, trained dogs are the only species of animal that may qualify as service animals under the ADA, and emotional support animals are expressively precluded from qualifying as service animals.
And there's a separate provision in there for miniature horses. I found that
see.
too. It's a bit confusing, but we're attempting to present the law, but not make assessments regarding who qualifies or who doesn't. That's got to be done on an each individual base, but it's out there. The law is out there.
But Sue, really, this gets to legal matters, whether they have the legal right. Hopefully, most landlords, employers, or businesses, if they ask us a couple simple questions, will just allow the animal in.
Right.
Most service animals are exceptionally well behaved.
And I also read that they cannot charge extra security rent, which I thought was
That
pretty
makes sense,
interesting.
yeah. But again, these are legal things. If they charge it, the person's going to have to go to court to
Yeah.
not pay it or get it back. And I hope it doesn't come down to a legal thing.
Yeah.
Hope everybody's going to help everybody else when it's documented that they need the pet's help.
Well, hopefully with social workers now, if we can provide that. That's what I said. A social worker just called a couple days ago, and I thought, good thing to research.
Yeah.
Because she's advocating on behalf of her client. So, all right, we have a bunch of questions. Okay, one, how do you keep animals from biting you? When I was first given this question, I thought it was a simple answer, but perhaps you can talk from your own experience. And
Well, that's very relevant right now because I have a puppy. I have a 4-month-old puppy. And you need to recognize that biting is a natural behavior, a normal behavior for dogs and many other species. And if you recognize that they have, let's call it an energy to bite, simply bleeding off their energy by exercising them can oftentimes reduce the biting a bit. But I also think it's important, just like a mother dog would, that when the puppy or the animal bites, and I don't think it's ever going to be welcome, but when it's an unwelcome bite, you essentially have to let it know that it has made a mistake. Some animals might bite the dog back if it bit them. I know my little puppy, he had a sore toe and I touched his toe, well, he bit me. And that might have been appropriate, but I wasn't going to correct that behavior. But simple
Right.
just teething behavior and biting, I think you need to recognize the animal has, let's just say, an energy to bite or a desire to bite, and you need to find a way to let that animal exercise that energy. So keeping chew treats or chew chips, rawhide or pig ears or some nylabone or something handy, especially when you have puppies. Keep a few chips always in your pockets or close by, so when the animal does bite you, simply gently hold its muzzle closed and give it a correction, like say no, and then put the appropriate item to chew in its mouth. And I find this works quite well. The animal is learning that don't bite this, bite this. And it's also learning that it's not appropriate to bite you. It's never appropriate for a dog, or really any animal, to bite us. And we want to get that message across in early life so that you don't have a 90-pound dog biting you later. I mean, a 10-pound puppy is one thing, but a big dog is a whole different story. So it's never a good idea to allow them to bite you.
Is there any product out there that's dangerous to give them? I remember, and I don't know if this is true or whether it's something that just went over the internet. Are greenies okay?
Greenies had a problem, and they've changed their formula. And the problem really was that people were giving dogs too small a greenie, and they were swallowing them whole or in half, but a big piece of greenie would end up in their intestine and cause a blockage. Now they've changed their formula so that it doesn't, so that it gets absorbed faster or melts faster, but they still recommend that you give the right size treat. Obviously you want a treat the dog can't swallow without chewing up into little pieces. If you give a big dog a bone the size of my finger, he's probably going to take one bite and swallow it, and he could get an obstruction from it. Other than that, I think you have specific problems to worry about. Some animals have beef food allergies, in which case rawhide is not a good idea. I've not found an animal that's allergic to pig ears, but of course they don't last long and give them much chewing. I think it's as simple as having a stick or something that they can chew on. You're just, as far as reducing biting, you're saying, don't bite me, bite this. And you recognize they want to chew, because that's one of the reasons puppies are chewing on you. So you've got to give them an opportunity to exercise that behavior, or it's going to be there.
Somebody had said tennis balls were dangerous because of the fuzz that they swallow. Is that true?
I've never heard that, but tennis balls are actually pretty tough. They survive a lot of pounding on the tennis court, and I've seen many dogs whose teeth get worn down from chronic carrying tennis balls around. But it's not dangerous, it just wears their teeth down faster.
I've seen dogs pick up rocks and
that
chew
can
on
be
rocks.
dangerous. Yeah, you want to curb that behavior, because I have had patients where I've had to remove stones from their intestines more than once, the same animals. And I believe that once an animal has been documented to be a stone chewer, it might be life-saving to use things like basket muzzles so they can't eat stones, providing them with lots of other things to chew, because usually, stones don't have any taste or appeal, and providing them with something better to chew simply might be a way to avoid a crisis.
Do you think it's safe to leave a dog with something to chew when you're not there, in the event that it might choke?
I think it's not only, it can be safe, you've got to choose the right thing to chew, like the right size greenie, or the right size rawhide or something, but I think it may be helpful to give them something to chew so they don't chew the wrong thing.
Okay. Next question. Let's talk about separation anxiety. Oh, that's a big one.
One of my favorite subjects. Yeah.
Okay.
The basis for separation anxiety is the animal can't deal with being alone, as simple as that sounds. And we often support that. What's your natural inclination when you see that the pet is crying when you've left it alone?
Take them with me.
You feel bad, the poor thing. Well, the natural inclination is to pet it and comfort it, which is actually supporting the behavior.
Okay.
And so, and I think there's a bit of codependency here for a lot of people. Oh, he can't live without me. And the next thing we do is we've got the dog with us all the time, which is only making the problem worse. In other words, he never learns to be alone, because we won't take that chance, or we want him to love us and be comfortable and like that. So it starts early in life. And I believe what happens, the way animals think, at least the way dogs think, is that, let's say you leave your dog in your house and leave for a couple of hours, and you come back and he has chewed up the couch and defecated on the rug. Well, he's still anxious when you come back, and he just learned that by chewing up the couch and defecating on the rug, you came back. So they will have a tendency to do the same thing again. And separation anxiety tends to get worse with age because they keep doing the same thing that brought about the good result, which was you returning. And you're always going to return. So as long as they're anxious and exhibiting one of these obnoxious behaviors like house soiling or damaging things, chewing things up, as long as they're anxious when you come back, you have alleviated that anxiousness and supported the behavior by coming back. So it's going to get worse over time.
So would you suggest medicating the animal for periods of time until he realizes, hey, they're coming back again?
Well, you know, I'm a real advocate of behavioral modification first. Medication is sometimes necessary because anxious animals can't learn. So if they're really scared because you're gone, they're not going to be able to learn a new pattern. They're going to do the same thing. And in those cases where the animal is really scared or anxious or freaked out, sometimes anti-anxiety medicines can be very helpful in starting the teaching process.
Right.
But we'll discontinue them fairly within a few months, a couple months.
Sure.
Because now they're getting results with their behavioral modification and learning to be alone. But you know, the behavioral modification starts in really simple senses, Sue. Teach the animal to sit over there by itself. If you have a separation anxiety animal, you know that it follows you wherever you go.
Right.
You may think that's great, but the animal hasn't learned to be by itself. So you can start by teaching your pet to stay on the other side of the room while you're away from it, which is fairly easy to do. What you do is you downstay it or make it sit and walk away from it until it seems anxious and just go back inside that distance. And if he or she will stay there quietly for a certain amount of time, maybe just a minute, you reward the behavior. Go back and give it a treat or a pet. And you can slowly increase your distance because this becomes a little training game that they appreciate because you're right there. So now you're on the other side of the room, and if she still is staying where she's supposed to, you bring her a treat and you keep the game going. The challenge comes when you're going to go out of sight. So let's say she's getting good at the game, you've got a command for stay there, and you tell her to stay, and you just go outside the door and you come right back in. Now you were gone for a second, but if she's still there, you retreat it. And what you try to do is increase the time that you're not there. Ultimately, you want to get it so he or she will be alone for about 20 minutes. If they can tolerate 20 minutes, we think that animal dogs' attention span is just about there. So what we're trying to do is get the dog to be alone until they forget that they're waiting for you.
You know what this reminds me of? The kids sleeping through the night.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing.
It was.
You have to wait for them to cry and cry and cry themselves out until they fall back to sleep. It's exactly the same thing. So and it helps to have aids like a chew treat, turning a radio or TV on to simulate somebody being there. But really, it's a matter of teaching the animal to be alone without getting anxious. And then they'll get rewarded. You're going to reward them at first, but they'll get rewarded when you come back because they're going to learn, hey, what I did, which hopefully was nothing, got mom to come back. So now they're learning the opposite way, and the separation anxiety is getting better because each time they have an experience where you leave and come back and they haven't done anything wrong, they get a positive reward for that because you're back. When they're at a puppy stage, try to teach them the downstay as quickly as possible and just get them so they'll be alone in the other room or maybe outside on a line or something while you're away. If you've accomplished that, you're not going to have separation anxiety problems.
This is so interesting. What I'd like to do is to continue on this conversation until our next guest comes on, because we're doing a double show today.
Okay.
If you have time,
I have time.
Because we have so many questions that are important, and we'll just keep on going, and then we'll make a show for next time. So thank you very much for watching For the Animals, and please join us next week when we're going to have Dr. Chris Mangini resume exactly where we are right now.
We'll see you next time.
So thank you.